Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is May the 3rd, 2024. It has been 3,749 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 73 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, and 800 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression. Today's podcast looks at events that happened on Thursday and Friday morning. During the podcast, you will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. A link is in the podcast description. There are only minor map updates today. The Russia-Ukraine war report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. 1. There is an elevated risk of large-scale drone and missile attacks against Ukrainian civilians and civilian infrastructure from May the 3rd to May the 10th, due to Orthodox Easter, the inauguration of Russian autocrat Vladimir Putin, and the May the 9th Victory Day celebrations in Russia. 2. Ukrainian personnel shortages are extending deployment times, limiting troop rotations, and forcing combat and effective units to maintain defensive positions, which is contributing to Russia's ongoing tactical advances. 3. Russian forces continue to exploit the delays in significant military aid from the US, the Czech Republic-led Ammunition Initiative, the European Union, and the United Kingdom, carrying out another 106 attacks on Thursday. 4. It will take another 2 to 4 weeks for significant military aid to reach the front lines, which should aid in stabilizing Ukrainian ground and air defenses. 5. In our assessment, renewed Russian chatter of a looming large-scale attack to capture the city of Kharkiv is a psychological operation. 6. In our assessment, Russia will not achieve its operational goal of capturing Chasiv Yar by May the 9th, but attacks will continue regardless of the cost. 7. Russia is setting conditions for a larger attack in the direction of Malinivka and Vuhledar. 8. The world is caught in the mutually assured destruction and stability paradox, with renewed nuclear threats by Kremlin leadership and Polish leadership openly discussing forward deploying United States nuclear weapons. 9. Russia's trampling of international humanitarian law has been accelerating since March the 22nd. We maintain that the willful ignoring of blatant Russian war crimes by international watchdogs will continue to encourage escalation. 10. The disjointed response to Russian aggression by Ukraine's allies continues to embolden Moscow, leading to NATO releasing a statement acknowledging the expanding acts of hybrid warfare. Continued inaction and the excessively risk-averse rules of engagement support an environment ripe for a serious international incident. 11. The attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at multiple nuclear facilities in Ukraine, and the situation is more serious, especially at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, than what the International Atomic Energy Agency is reporting. Russia attacked civilian targets in Odessa, Kharkiv, Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. With Russian autocrat Putin's obsession with dates, in our assessment, the lack of missile and drone strikes on Thursday indicates that a larger attack is being prepared. Russia targeted civilians and civilian infrastructure during Orthodox Easter in 2022 and 2023, and there is no reason to believe this year will be different. In the Kharkiv Oblast, 3 UMPB D-30 guided bombs struck a school and sports training complex in Derhachi. A pensioner and 8 children were wounded, with 2 11-year-olds, 2 12-year-olds, a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old in hospital. Russian shelling of Petropavlivka and Kupiansk-Uzlovy wounded 2 pensioners, with 1 in hospital. A 66-year-old was killed when their home was bombed in the village of Novokalinove. In Free Donetsk Oblast, Memrik was shelled by Grad rockets, killing a 65-year-old woman and her 12-year-old granddaughter. 2 more civilians were wounded in the attack. Russia shelled and bombed 14 villages, settlements and cities in Free Kherson Oblast, wounding 1 person in Zolota Balka. Here is today's action report, and there is a lot of assessment. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, or GSAFU, updated the number of Russian attacks on Wednesday to 121 and reported that 106 attacks were carried out yesterday. In the last week, Russian troops have carried out 731 discrete attacks, with the moving average climbing from 97 a day to 104. Ukrainian military analyst Alexander Kovalenko, who has appeared on our podcast, reached the same conclusion as our analyst team on why Russia has increased its operational tempo. Quote, "Until weapons begin to arrive en masse in Ukraine, the enemy will try to advance and seize at all costs." Over the last 24 hours, Russian forces didn't make significant gains. The deputy head of the main Defense Intelligence Directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, the GUR, Major General Vadym Skibitsky, gave a wide-ranging interview to The Economist about the ongoing battlefield situation. The Economist wrote, quote, "Things, he says, are as difficult as they have ever been since the early days of Russia's full-scale invasion, and they are about to get worse." Unquote. General Skibitsky, giving what was almost certainly a sanctioned interview, believes that in the short to mid-term Russia will capture Chasiv Yar, employing the same tactics used in Avdiivka. For the rest of 2024, Moscow will continue its efforts to capture the rest of Luhansk and Donetsk oblasts, which has been an operational goal since 2014. Most importantly, he believes that even if Ukraine pushes Russian troops back to the 1991 borders, autocrat Putin will continue his war of aggression on the borders of Ukraine. In his assessment, the war won't end on the battlefield, but at the negotiating table. What's our assessment? It should be no surprise for our readers and listeners that we agree that Russia will capture Chasiv Yar. That's been our assessment for months. While the delay in ammunition and arms from Ukraine's allies contributed to the broader situation on the battlefield, it is not the only issue. Last year, we believed that the defense of Soledar and Bakhmut was the right decision, and it resulted in the destruction of the private military company Wagner Group and the Second Army Corps of the so-called Luhansk People's Republic, which has yet to recover. Had Ukrainian forces withdrawn in February 2023, as some Western advisors demanded, the Russian flag would almost certainly be flying over Chasiv Yar and beyond, and PMC Wagner may still be intact. A year later, we stand by our assessment. However, we were against Ukraine's practice of sending under-trained territorial guards and state border guard forces to the line of conflict and the use of Soviet-era tactics by some Ukrainian commanders. Nothing has changed from February 2022. The most precious military resource is a grunt with a gun. Grunts with guns take territory, grunts with guns hold territory. The longer a soldier is trained, the better they understand the sneaky ways their enemy will try to kill them. Additionally, they can learn more creative ways to kill their enemy. The decision to send some Ukrainian troops with just 2 to 3 weeks of training to the front in 2022 and 2023 is haunting Kyiv. Had they received 8 to 10 weeks of training, Ukrainian forces would have more combat potential and would have suffered fewer losses. In 2024, it is Ukraine that is suffering from a lack of grunts with guns. Mobilization can't come fast enough, but the mistakes of late 2022 cannot be repeated. The new troops must receive thorough training before deployment, even if that means sacrificing territory in the short term. Yes, the situation is bad, but it isn't hopeless. Russia is facing a different problem. While grunts with guns take and hold territory, to achieve a rapid breakthrough, like Ukraine did during the Kharkiv counteroffensive, modern troops need mobility. In 2022, Russian forces were mobile, holding a significant advantage in armored vehicles, but lacked grunts with guns to hold captured territory. Since January 1, 2023, Russian forces have captured approximately 525 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory, most of it empty fields and settlements bombed to dust. And during those almost 18 months, Russia has squandered its mobility advantage. Russian troops can only be moved in small groups contained in improvised armored vehicles, a shrinking number of UAZ-455 loaves, and Chinese-sourced ATVs. The lack of mobility is forcing Russian troops to advance trench by trench, tree by tree, and house by house. Russia now has the grunts with guns, but no way to move them quickly. We maintain that in 2024 Russia can make significant tactical advances and achieve the operational goal of capturing Chasiv Yar, but not much else, as long as Ukrainian commanders don't make any major mistakes. There has also been significant chatter in the Russian information space of a looming offensive to capture the city of Kharkiv. We've been ignoring the psychological operation campaign and have an editorial policy of not giving rumors oxygen, but General Skibitsky discussed it with The Economist. The number of Russian troops along the Kharkiv and Sumy Oblast border is around 40,000, a sharp decline from October 2023. The composition is mostly under-trained light infantry, including conscripts with limited mobility and armor support. 40,000 Russian troops crossing the border into Ukraine would be able to make tactical gains, but is far too small of a force to capture or even threaten the city of Kharkiv. Now, let's talk about what happened on the battlefield. Starting in the Kharkiv Oblast, Russian assaults expanded in the Kupiansk area of operation, or AO. Mutual fighting was reported near Sinkivka. East of Kupiansk, Russian forces continued their attacks on the eastern edge of Kislivka. In the Svatove AO of Kharkiv and Luhansk oblasts, Russian forces continued to probe Ukrainian defensive lines, attacking near Berestove, Stelmachivka, Novoyegorivka, and in the direction of Grekivka. In the Kremenna AO of Luhansk Oblast, it was a similar situation, with positional fighting and Russian probing attacks in the directions of Nevske, Terny, Yampolivka, and Torske. Mutual fighting continued south of Dubrova, and we can't share additional information yet, due to operational security. In the Siversk AO of Luhansk Oblast, there was no change from yesterday. Russian forces continued their attempts to advance on Bilogorivka from the east and southeast and carried out another series of intense attacks in the direction of Verkhnyokamyensk from Zolotarivka. Moving to the Donbas, let's start in northeastern Donetsk Oblast. Yesterday, in the Siversk and Solidar AO of Donetsk Oblast, Russian forces carried out intense attacks east of Spirne, southeast of Vyimka, and south of Rozdolivka. The attacks were repulsed, and Russian forces suffered heavy losses near Spirne. In the Kostantinivka AO, Russian forces were held to the eastern edges of the Novy micro-district and were pushed back from the Siversky-Donetsk-Donbas Canal northwest of Ivanivska. Yuri Fedorenko, commander of the Achilles Battalion of the 92nd Separate Mechanized Brigade, said, quote, "Tactically, the enemy is acting as follows. They are trying to capture Novy Chasiv Yar in an operational encirclement, so they are moving from the top to the village of Bogdanivka and from the bottom to the village of Ivanivska. Over the past week, the enemy has not had any tactical successes, despite the fact that about 30 combat clashes take place in this area every day." On Marathon, the director of communications for the 26th Artillery Brigade said, quote, "The enemy cannot capture Chasiv Yar from the flanks. They storm directly with infantry in separate groups." Positional fighting continued near Klishivka and Andriivka, with no change in the situation. In the Avdiivka AO in southwest Donetsk Oblast, Russian forces made limited but tactically significant advances from Ocheretine, carrying out 31 ground attacks. There continues to be significant fog of war and a wide area between both combatants' forwardmost lines of friendly troops. Fighting continued on the edges of Arkhangelsk, with Russian forces advancing toward the village from Ocheretine. Ukrainian troops in the lowlands between the two settlements have likely withdrawn due to the extreme risk of becoming encircled. The Russian Ministry of Defense made another claim that the village of Berdychi had been captured. Russian mercenary Melblogovo Gonzo reported that fighting continued. We assessed Russian forces captured Berdychi over a week ago, and Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief Colonel General Alexander Syrsky announced Ukraine's withdrawal last week. Fighting reportedly continued in Solovyove and in the direction of Sokil. Ukrainian units continue to hold the Durna River line south of Berdychi. Mutual fighting was reported in Semenivka and east of Umanska. Russian forces also continued their attempts to advance in the direction of Yasnobrodivka. Further south, mutual fighting was reported in Netailove, and Russian attacks from Pervomaiske were repulsed. Fighting continued in the Vuhledar Rayon, but at a lower intensity. The only area of significant fighting was in Paraskoviivka. Fighting also continued in the Staromlynivka Rayon, with Ukrainian forces repulsing Russian attacks south of Urozhaine and launching a counterattack west of Staromayorsk. In occupied Donetsk Oblast, Russian railroad engineers have restored service between Mariupol and Volnovakha. The first train, a diesel locomotive, left Mariupol with an open wagon car at the front to detect mines. The restoration of rail service will improve Russian logistics, further complicating the Ukrainian defense of Vuhledar. In the Orikhiv Rayon of Zaporizhzhia Oblast, positional fighting continued in the no man's land in and south of Robotyne. In occupied Berdyansk, the Russian repair base at the Dormash factory was attacked by Ukraine. Pictures showed a large fire burning at the known Russian base. In the Kherson Rayon, Russian forces launched 3 attacks on Ukrainian positions in Krynki, suffered losses and retreated. In occupied Oleshki, Ukrainian artillery struck a Russian position, sparking a large fire visible from the right bank of Free Kherson. A Russian Fab 1500 bomb fell off a Russian plane, landing in occupied Novazburyivka. The bomb didn't detonate, and Russian engineers decided to dispose of it in place. No one was injured in the blast, but the concussion broke many windows. On the Russian front, Russian sources reported that Ukrainian drones successfully struck a Russian fuel depot in the Temkinsky district of Smolensk. That's all we knew at the time of recording. Southeast of Koreneva in the Kursk region, the Special Operation Forces of Ukraine destroyed a Buk 1 air defense system and 1 support vehicle. This is the 3rd Buk destroyed near the Sumy Oblast border of Ukraine in the last 5 days. In our assessment, Ukraine is either setting conditions for the arrival of F-16 multi-role fighter planes or creating gaps in Russian defenses to get more drones across the border. Here is my Theaterwide update. Ukraine commissioned 2 new coastal patrol vessels provided by Estonia. Estonian officials were present with the former PO-1 Roland, renamed Irpin, and the PO-2 Risto, renamed Reni. The boats were commissioned by Estonia in 2020 and have 2 12.7mm machine guns and a remote-controlled FNC Defender combat station. They were designed to operate in severe weather and will be used to escort civilian cargo ships. In a statement, NATO declared it was, quote, deeply concerned about recent malign activities on Allied territory, including those resulting in the investigation and charging of multiple individuals in connection with hostile state activity affecting Czechia, Estonia, Germany, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and the United Kingdom. The public memo accused Russia of conducting an increasing number of acts of sabotage, violence, cyber and electronic interference, and disinformation campaigns. Quote, We condemn Russia's behavior and we call on Russia to uphold its international obligations, as allies do theirs. Russia's actions will not deter allies from continuing to support Ukraine." Unquote. At the time of publication, the Kremlin had not responded to the strongly worded letter. Unfortunately, the response will likely be more attacks on Ukrainian civilians. And that's what we know. Join me again on Monday. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.